Right. Thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. What I am endeavouring to do is set up my new YouTube channel, which I call Lord Londonstone. You catch that with that bracket going on. So, my name is Magnus Nielsen, and I'm setting up a new channel called Lord Londonstone. And as the name suggests, it's a series of YouTube videos about places of interest in London. And what I want to do especially is to set up a series of videos relating to the story of Jack the Ripper, who was very active in the East End of London in the late summer and autumn of the year 1888. So it would be in this particular district. But this particular part of London is also interesting for so many other places, so I'll be talking about them as well. And what I normally do when I start my tours, and I'm one of about 20, maybe even 30 people who go around the streets here in the evening talking about Jack the Ripper. What I want to do is start from Aldgate Pump. So let me just show you which is here. It's this large stone structure, and this Aldgate Pump really marks the beginning of London's East End. We're still in the precincts of what used to be the old Roman and medieval city. And the road ahead would take us first of all to Aldgate, which was the old gate in the Roman and medieval wall that was built around about the year 200 and pulled down in the mid-18th century as a traffic obstruction. This street here over on the right-hand side is Fenchurch Street, which was laid out by the Romans. Virtually the first thing they did when they arrived in these islands, having built London Bridge, is they laid out a street that would connect the head of the northern bridgehead of London Bridge with the city of Colchester, which is some 60 miles out towards the east. But what they did was create Colchester or Camalodunum as the capital of their newly conquered province. They found it wasn't really very convenient, so after the rebellion of Boadicea in the year 60, they decided they would move back to London or Londinium. And London has been the capital of Britain ever since. Anyway, this is Fenchurch Street. As I say, when the Romans laid it out, the idea was to connect with London Bridge. In fact, today the road curves around to the right and enters into Lombard Street. But anyway, what we'll do is move on, and I'll just talk a bit about this structure here. This is Aldgate Pump, and Aldgate Pump is a local landmark and has been for many hundreds of years. This is where the local people are able to get their water from a well here that was dug in the Middle Ages. It may very well date from Roman times, as indeed many of the wells of London do. And this particular structure was set up in the 18th century. And I say the water here, they discovered in Victorian times, actually flowed through 3 graveyards, so it wasn't very thought to be fit to drink. And in the end, what they did was take the handle off in 1876, which was really just as well, I suppose. So anyway, that's a look at Aldgate Pump, and we'll move on from here. And what I propose to do is cross the road by Leadenhall Street. At the present moment, I have the red signal, which prevents me from crossing because I'm a good little citizen, and I don't cross against a red light, I don't jaywalk. So while we're standing here, I can show you Leadenhall Street, which is named after the Leadenhall, or the Roman Basilica. That is, Leadenhall is the Anglo-Saxon translation. The Basilica in Roman London was the most important building. It was the place for law courts and the place of public administration. Of course, all that's vanished now, but if you walk down Leadenhall Street a little distance, you will come to Lloyd's of London, the insurance market. You don't have to go very far to get to Lloyd's of London. Then beyond that, another 2 or 3 minutes, you will come to Bank Junction. Now, we've just got the green signal, so we can cross over the road. And what I now propose to do is walk along the north side of Aldgate Street, carry on the north side into Whitechapel High Street and then into the Whitechapel Road. But before I do that, I'd just like to make a little detour here into Mitre Street. Mitre Street here, you'll see, is clearly marked out with its name, and Mitre Street marks the site of the original Priory Church of the Holy Trinity, Aldgate, which was built in the year 1108. It was one of the largest churches in London at the time, and it was built for the priors of the Augustinian order. Priors are very frequently confused with monks. They weren't exactly monks. Monks prefer to live in monasteries and to keep a distance from towns and cities. They prefer to live secludedly so that they can actually concentrate on their prayers and devotions without interruption. But priors made it a point of actually building their priories in towns and cities and catering to the religious and material needs of ordinary people. So what I'm going to do is just take you a little way down here. I'm not going to go all the way down, but if we went all the way down, we'd come into Mitre Square, which was the scene of the murder of Catherine Eddowes, one of the victims of Jack the Ripper, and I shall talk about her extensively later on in another video. For the time being, what I would like to do, however, is just show you through the window. You may be able to make out a pointed archway, which is now all that remains of the Priory Church of the Holy Trinity. How that survived, I don't know. I presume it was actually built into the wall of a larger house, and so they didn't think it worth knocking down. But by some sort of miracle, it has survived the fire of London, and it's also survived the bombings in the last war, and still preserving it. Now, looking up here, what you can see is all the new skyline of London as it's rising up. All these modern buildings which are going up and have gone up in the past 10, 20 years or so. And interestingly enough, that's the Gherkin, that building that comes to a point, because it looks a bit like a gherkin. There are another 500, in fact I think there are more than 500 buildings waiting for planning permission. So no doubt the skyline of London is going to look very, very different in 10 or 20 years' time. We'll get back onto the High Street. And what we're now going to do is go past Aldgate School. Now, until a few years ago, in fact until 2020, this place was known as Sir John Cass's School. And Sir John Cass was a very prominent, he was Member of Parliament for the City of London. He was also what they call an alderman, so he was a great, big, very wealthy man who did a great deal of work in the City of London, the administration of the City of London. They found, unfortunately, that he made a great deal of his money from the slave trade, so they decided in the end that he should become an unperson. They do everything they can now to obliterate his name from history, which I think is really rather sad. Not to commend him for investing in slavery as he did, but I dare say there could have been other people who invested in slavery who didn't bother to give all their money to charitable foundations. Originally, Sir John Cass's School was built for the benefit of 50 boys and 40 girls. Now, that was really quite progressive in the 18th century. To start thinking that it's important to give girls an education. So that just shows you the sort of person he was. And indeed, when you think about it now, all his money is going out to other educational foundations around London, including Metropolitan University, which benefits those people, not least, who once were slaves. And, well, that's just one of history's little ironies. History is full of ironies. Right, this is the site of Aldgate, and this is Aldgate Square. And there's a column here which gives you a map of the district, and there's another column which tells you something about it's an artist's impression of what the old Roman gatehouse used to look like. as it would have been built around about the year 200. If you look very, very closely, you will see, just a little way beyond it, the artist has very carefully shown the gravestones a little way beyond it. It was Roman law that you couldn't bury people actually within the precincts of the city. You had to bury them outside, and you'll find that in Roman towns and Roman cities throughout what was once the Roman Empire. They built the graveyards immediately along the roads that led out of the city. So that just shows that. Now here, what we've got is an interesting depiction of a cross-section of the Roman wall with a Roman soldier looking out towards, towards the east. And round here, let's have another look at it. They show you here, they've got a map, not very easy to show you here, but this map was dated 1676, so 10 years after the fire, so it shows you all the neighbourhood as it was in those days. And also they have photographs of some of the archaeological discoveries. Right, as we go along, we've got skateboarding here, which is an interesting occupation. I just want to carry on the way, but before I do that, it's worth pointing out to you now, as we make our way along, we have somewhere along here, oh there it is, hang on, let me go back, I knew I'd gone past it, London Wall. You can see here in the pavement they have actually set out the line of what used to be London Wall. Of course they had to take that down because it was a traffic obstruction. And also down here, what they have done is they show the line of the original Aldgate, or the Old Gate, the site. It's actually down here and it's marked over on the pavement. And if you look across the way, you can see they've got Boots the chemist, and set into that white pillar, they have an oblong blue cloth which indicates the exact site of Aldgate. So we're actually standing on it now. Right, Aldgate Square. This was all laid out in as long ago as 2019. Right, okay, well, continue. We're walking along, let's say, on the north side of Aldgate High Street, and over here, what we now have is the Church of St. Botolph. And this church dates from the year 1744, designed by a man called George Dance. However, there's been a church many hundreds of years before that, probably at least 1,000 years before that, certainly from before the Norman Conquest. St. Botolph was an abbot. He had a monastery in South Lincolnshire, and he was celebrated for repairing bridges. And that's what he dedicated his life, to make it easier for travellers to move around. So he became one of the patron saints of travellers, rather like St. Christopher, and it became customary to build churches immediately outside medieval London, so that people could either go and pray to him for the benefit of a safe journey to their destination, or offer thanks having arrived in London for a safe journey. St. Botolph, this is St. Botolph's Aldgate. There's another St. Botolph at Bishopsgate, and there's even another one at Aldersgate. So he was quite a popular saint in his own way. And say, lived in a monastery in South Lincolnshire, and a little town grew up around about the monastery, which was later called Botolphstown, or Boston. And it was from that town, that port, that the Pilgrim Fathers set out, first of all to safety in the Netherlands, and then they went to Southampton, and then they went across the Atlantic in 1620. Okay, moving on from here, just worth pointing out to you, is a drinking fountain. And there really aren't very many of these left. Certainly there aren't any that work that I know of. But they started drinking fountains, putting up drinking fountains in 1859. and they actually had some fresh water that they could actually link up with. Now, the idea at that time was to be able to wean the ordinary working man off alcohol, so they put up fountains of fresh water all over the place. And they did this, I say, this is an act of charity, and this particular fountain was the creation of Frederick David Mocatta, and that strikes me as a name, probably Sephardic Jewish, I think. There are many, many Jewish people in this area in the year 1906. In fact, they'd arrived, well, there have been Jews who have been trickling into London really since the time of Oliver Cromwell in the mid-17th century. And they were very, very predominant. I mean, there was half the population of Whitechapel was Jewish at one time. After the Second World War, they started to move out to places like Golders Green and Stamford Hill. But it's just worth, you've got these things here, and what they have, just to show you, is this cup, which has been changed so that it can't be taken away. The fountain doesn't work, no point trying it. But anyway, this is the drinking fountain. And as I said before, this is the Church of St. Botolph. And as I make my way further forward, just immediately in front of the Church of St. Botolph is a street called Mitre, that if you pursue it long enough, we won't go down there, but if you did, you'd come all the way to the Tower of London. We won't go there. What we'll do is head off towards the east. As I do this, I make my way towards Aldgate Station. Now, Aldgate Station was built in 1876 as a continuation of the Metropolitan Railway that had opened in 1868. That was an underground railway. They built this, let's say, in 1876, 8 years later. And this present building dates from 1926. When they started to dig this place out, they stumbled upon 1,000 skeletons of people who'd been very hastily buried after the Great Plague of 1665. And that was the last great outbreak of bubonic plague in this country. 1/4 of the population, that's to say 100,000 people, died as a result, and 1,000 of those people were buried here in the pit, very, very hastily, I might add. And then once they'd just thrown the bodies in, they just covered them over with earth and forgot all about them. Quite apparently started building on this, but when they only discovered when they started to build the station. So you have all these disturbed bodies, and it's not any wonder then, is it, that people say it's has a very spooky atmosphere late at night. And even those people who work on the underground, once the underground was closed to the public, find it a very, very weird place with all sorts of strange sounds. Anyway, I'm moving down here, just continuing this journey on foot towards Whitechapel. And, well, you can see for yourself that directly in front of me, ahead of me, is a bus stop. Nothing remarkable about that, but it is more or less the site where Catherine Eddowes, whom our victim in Mitre Square, she was discovered here at 8:30 in the evening of Sunday, the 29th of September. She'd spent the day drinking, and by the time she was completely drunk. She was found to be singing and dancing on this pavement, but not exactly this pavement, but somewhere around here, and she fell down into the gutter and had to be picked up by a couple of police officers who then frog-marched her all the way down Middlesex Street, which I'm going to show you, down to Bishopsgate Police Station. And so she was in police custody for the rest of the evening. However, she was let out at 1 o'clock in the morning. you went straight back to the church, because the church in those days was a pickup point for prostitutes. And she just had the misfortune to meet Jack the Ripper. Anyway, I'll talk more about Catherine Edwards. I mean, there's a full story there. I won't go to it now. But just before I cross over the road, it's just worth showing you, this is the White Dragon, which marks the city limits, the limits of the historical city of London. These were laid out in the 1200s. I don't know when this dragon was put up, probably sometime in Victorian times. It's a white dragon, which is symbolic of the fact that it is actually defending the city of London from evil. Most dragons in mythology are actually evil themselves. This is a good dragon. This is a dragon which is actually defending the city from evil influences. And what it has here, you can see for yourself, is a shield. And on that shield you have the cross of St. George, and then in the top left-hand corner you have the sword of St. Paul. So this is the city limits of the square mile of London. And what I'm doing is just standing at a crossroads now. Leading off to my right-hand side is Mansell Street, and Mansell Street will take me down to the Tower of London, and then it leads across Tower Bridge into Bermondsey and the South Bank, whereas over here on the left-hand side, beyond these buses and further down on the left, you have Middlesex Street, which is better known to the world as Petticoat Lane. On a Sunday morning, this is where they have a street market. They've had a street market here since the year 1609, and you can go and see and get yourself something from there. But what I want to do now is cross over the street as quickly as I possibly can. But I've got a red signal, so I can't, so I just have to wait here. I think what I will do is close this video down, and I'll see you all again on the other side. So